Hi, here's Andre with another editorial from Aurora School Digital. We continue in the theme of animation and take a look at the timeline today. A few words about the timeline I have already mentioned in the last video. It allows creating complex sequences from several individual animation clips. On one hand, I can animate individual objects over time. On the other hand, I can animate multiple objects at the same time, essentially creating a choreography. For example, for cut scenes or predefined sequences, similar to video editing programs, there are tracks where the individual animation, the difference from the animation window, clips can be arranged over time. Thus is that several unrelated game objects can be animated at once. Multiple clips are possible per track, which can also be manipulated, such as cutting or blending. All of this is not possible with single animations. A drawback of the timeline is that it is temporally fixed, and therefore is more suitable for predefined sequences, like cut scenes, and less for dynamic animations. Similar to animation clips, the timeline is stored as a file. This has the advantage that it is reusable. Like animation clips, I can animate other objects, thus with the exact same timeline. For instance, I can take a timeline that I've created for a plane and apply it to a spaceship and animate it that way. Moreover, with the timeline similar to the animation window, I can record animation clips. These are then directly saved in the timeline. This is sometimes practical if you want to make a quick movement and not a complex animation, which you would rather do with the animation window. Let's take a closer look at this using an example. Just like in the last exercise, we have a small car, and we only want it to drive around. This time, however, not animated with the animation window, but with the timeline window. To open this, I go to the main menu above, under Window, Sequencing and Timeline. Then it first opens at a position I don't quite like. I prefer it below, so I still see the game itself, which is also usually a bit wider, since we need quite a lot of space here, and leave the Project Explorer open on the left side, since we frequently drag animation clips over here to create my first timeline. I select the car. You see, in every animation window, here comes the Create button. If I press it, then a few important things are created. Some important things are generated. On the one hand, he asks me where to save the timeline set of type player. For that, I already created a folder called Timeline. Storage is clean and can. Timeline is also a name, which is quite alright. What we see is that, here for the car, the anim has been added that we need, and also a so-called play director. At this point, you can also see that the stay director that timeline sees what you have just created uses here under play. In addition, a first track was created for the game object on which we initialized the timeline. In our case, car tracks, or in German tracks, allow us to distribute animation clips over time. Based on the play director, you can also see nicely the reusability of the timeline. It is the director, who is now directly used in this scene, has this attribute bindings, which determines for each track which game object from the scene is used. If, for example, here, instead of the char, I use the camera, then you can see how this timeline is updated here first. But effectively, this information is not stored in the timeline, but in the player via director. Let me quickly undo it, because we don't want to animate the camera but our car. At this point, it may be important to know that the play director doesn't necessarily have to be on the object I want to animate. The animated objects are purely determined by assigning them to the tracks here. The play director is effectively completely detached and can be on any object in the scene. Each track we have is assigned to exactly one game object, what you see here in front. But it's also possible for a game object to have multiple tracks. For this, for example, we just need to drag the game object again from the hierarchy down here into the timeline, and then it asks us what type of track we want to create. There are actually 6 different ones, even though you only see 4 here. That makes sense for this type of game object. So I'd rather go to the big plus to show you all of them. We have active tracks on one hand. They are practically to activate individual objects of the scene with the help of the timeline, and to deactivate them so that they are completely invisible. Furthermore, we have game objects, animation tracks, which we will use most often today. With those, we can put animation clips on. Audio tracks are probably self-explanatory. Besides that, we have a few special tracks: the control track, the signal track, and the playable track. These are more for advanced features of Unity, which we won't be dealing with today. Okay, let's get started. So we can animate the car. I've already prepared 2 animations, one animation to move half a block forward, and another to make a turn. You can also preview the animation here in this preview area. Just now, it complained that there is no model for it yet. So I'll just move my car from here over, and if I press play here, then you'll see it moves nicely or makes a turn. These animation clips can now be used multiple times on the animation tracks. As always in Unity, there are several ways to reach the same goal. If I want to create a new track, I have 3 different options. I can either drag an object from the hierarchy into the timeline. Then it asks me if I want to create a new track, for example, an animation track. I can press the plus sign and create an animation track. No object is assigned yet, but I can also drag an existing animation into the timeline, for example, here into the empty space, and it will create a new track with the animation already in place, but also without a game object. If I want to assign an object to these tracks, I simply drag it from the hierarchy directly into this name field. To animate our car, we only need a single animation track for that. So I'll delete the other cars by pressing the delete key, at least on Windows. To add a clip, I can either drag it directly via drag and drop into the respective track, or I can open a context menu at any point of the track by right-clicking and select Add from Animation Clip. Then open the Animation Clip search and select and add a clip there. We don't need this now. For now, similar to the animation window, we have a timeline here, a playback button, this white line that we can move. To preview the animation, I also have the option to play the animation directly via the play button. As you probably noticed, our car isn't in the same position as before. We'll take care of that shortly. But first, let's talk briefly about navigation and manipulation in this window. I can select clips with the left mouse button. If I go to their edges, I can resize them. It's important to note at this point that this doesn't lead to a change in the speed of the clip, but rather to it repeating more frequently. You can see it almost like this repetition. Here L1 stands for the first loop, provided 2 and 3, provided the clip is also a live clip. Let's take a loop at that. As you can see, it simply drives consistently forward. We can reposition clips via drag and drop with Control, or at least under Windows. And I think with Command D, you can duplicate a clip. You see, when you bring clips so close, there's a mapping functionality, so there's practically no small pause between them. Let's take a look at the whole thing now. You'll see that the car after the first clip simply jumps back. That's because the animation clips generally start from this point. To fix this, we need to set so-called offsets. We can set the start position of the first clip. We don't click on the clip itself, but on the track, and set the track offset. Offsets means, namely, that the animations start exactly there where the game object in the scene is positioned. With that, we've solved the first problem. However, the second clip still starts at the same position. To fix this, we right-click on the clip and select Match Offsets to Previous Clip. This means that the new beginning of the clip starts exactly where the previous clip ended. Let's take a look at that. You'll see that it works, and the car simply continues to move forward. With that knowledge, we're now ready to assemble our entire animation. For that, I prefer to go into top-down perspective. You can see it a bit better. From there, first I'll delete the clips that I just placed in as an example. A bit of background information. I mentioned that I've created animations already. Firstly, this dry, which will animate the car about half a block in this world to approximately here. Next to it, there's the turn animation, right, which animates a turn. And from these two animations, I can assemble the entire circuit. This means that I first need to drive forward about half a block to here. I basically drag the drive forward block right in. After that, I want to make a first turn and accordingly use the turn. If we play this now, we have the same problem again as before. So I right-click on it and say, Match Offset to Previous Clip. And so, we've already completed the first turn. To continue, I use the drive forward block again. In this case, I have two. Starting from here, drive to half blocks. Accordingly, I extend the to double its length. You may have noticed Unity automatically did this mapping again here, so I come exactly to twice the length. And again in this case, we need to match offsets to Previous Clip, and we've made some progress again, and so I continue them step by step to complete the entire circuit. Accordingly, another turn. Then again, 2, 3 forward. Another turn right. Then again, 2, 3 forward. Another turn right. And this time just one drive forward, as we started in the middle. As always, it now resets back here again. This time I simply select all the clips and say match offsets each time. Should I do it all at once? And as we can see, we now have a complete circuit, which I will now slowly drive through to make sure it really believes me. Now I also want the car to honk occasionally as it drives along. For that, I'll create that simply in this case by choosing the sound, in this case, strong, and just dragging it in here, and it will automatically create a new track and put the sound in once. I'll drag it in 1 or 2 more times so it happens more often, and if I start now, then it's a preview. You know, with the placement of clips and setting offsets, that's already the most important for the timeline. But of course, there are still a few more specific features that I'll show you now. Occasionally, it's like this, that I want to make some tracks immutable. For that, I click, for example, here, in the animation track, on these 3 dots and say lock. And accordingly, I can't do anything here anymore.
So that I don't accidentally move anything. In other cases, for example in this sharing, it's just that it bothers me a bit, because the sound is a bit intrusive, and then I can simply mute the track, and again go to the 3 dots and mute. There's also the hotkey L. And second, the Hokkien. Currently, our timeline doesn't loop, meaning when it reaches the end, the car won't continue driving. It will just stop. This is a characteristic of the play character, which I've essentially applied to the car. There's the so-called wrap mode, which you see here. Currently, it's set to none. You could say that it loops. Then it repeats indefinitely. There's also the option hold. Then it just stays exactly where it stopped last. With the none option currently active, it means it resets to the starting position, which, in our case, is also the ending position. Let me just set it to loop. And now, when I play it, it will keep on driving continuously. Many of the things I've done, through drag and drop, can also be precisely set. For example, I can click on a clip and precisely set its start and end position, and its duration. Additionally, I can also set the respective offsets, which we currently have through the menu set automatically. Let's set it. Of course, Unity also allows you to adjust the speed of a clip. I'll do it here via this speed multiplier, which is currently set to 1, meaning normal speed. I wish I could now just click on all clips and set this multiplier for all at once. Unfortunately, it seems to get lost in the summarized view. So I'll do it individually for each. If I change it here, you see that I also have the clip length. It makes sense too. The clip is now twice as fast, and at the end, I'll naturally move them closer together again. Otherwise, we'll have pauses in driving. I'll just do the first ones for now, and leave the rest at the normal length for now. Just like this. And if we play this now, you'll see that it's much faster here. And then it continues at almost half the normal speed. That was essentially the most important about the timeline. Of course, it has many more features. I can, for example, cut clips. I can also, using these recording buttons, create new animation clips without having to use the animation window. And what is sometimes practical, especially when working with animations for characters, you can also blend clips. This ensures that the animations transition smoothly into each other and are not choppy. As with the last video about the animation window, there is for this tutorial an extra PDF where it says a little more, especially about the special features of the timeline. We will of course also provide you with this project. The most important thing we took away from this tutorial is how, with the help of the timeline, tracks are created, how you position clips on these tracks to create a kind of choreography or sequence, and of course how you set the offsets so that these clips also fit together sensibly and don't always start from the starting point of the track anew.